So I want to give you another example of how breathtakingly stupid this guy is. Not that you needed any more evidence, but this one made me laugh, so I'm going to share it with you. But before I get to that, I want to talk about these Republican members of Congress, these insurrectionist co-conspirators who tried to help Donald Trump essentially overthrow the Republic, overturn the results of an election, and to install himself illegally for another term as president. And I've been seeing these members of Congress complaining, just furious, about Jack Smith and the fact that Jack Smith was able to get a subpoena and warrants for their phones and other records and things, and they're pissed. How dare you? I'm a United States Senator. I am above the law. No one can investigate me. And so they want Jack Smith to be prosecuted. Of course, Trump wants Jack Smith to be prosecuted. And they want to impeach Judge Boasberg, who is the judge who signed off on these warrants. And I came across a couple of posts this morning, which is what reminded me about this and why I'm talking about it here. The first was from a Senator, Bill Hagerty. And he posted on Twitter, "I am for accountability for Jack Smith and everyone complicit in this abuse of power. I do not want, and I am not seeking damages for myself paid for with taxpayer dollars. Jack Smith targeted President Trump and his most ardent supporters, which includes me. Jack Smith and all involved in this abuse should be held to the highest level of accountability, something which rarely seems to happen in Washington. To be blunt, Jack Smith should be in jail." So he says Jack Smith should be in jail, but he's not seeking damages for himself. Now, in order to get damages, you'd have to file a lawsuit, right? And you'd have to prove that you were entitled under law to damages. So let's just keep that in mind for a second. So here he is. He should be in jail, but I'm not going to seek damages. Then I came across a post by Tommy Tuberville. Now, if there is anyone in Washington, really anywhere, who could give Donald Trump a run for his money as the world's stupidest person, it's Tommy Tuberville. Or is it Tuberville? Don't much care. He wrote a lengthy post, and scanning it briefly, I don't really see any misspellings, which leads me to believe he didn't actually write this. I'm not going to read this whole thing to you. I will just read the final part here. He says, "And Jack Smith, who ordered my phone to be surveilled, needs to be disbarred and thrown in jail. If they aren't, I will sue the living hell out of every Biden official involved in this to make sure this never happens to a conservative again." Well, first of all, dummy, you're not a conservative. You're a fascist. There's a difference. But secondly, no, you won't. You're not going to sue anybody for the same reason that Senator Bill Hagerty isn't going to sue anybody. Because if you were to sue, you'd have to sue the Department of Justice, because Jack Smith worked for the Department of Justice. You'd have to sue them. And whether or not you sued them or you tried to sue Jack Smith in his personal capacity somehow, you would open yourself up to allowing Jack Smith to prove in a court of law and demonstrate for the judge or for the jury why he was investigating you. And you'd have to go through lengthy discovery, because this is this would be a civil case. Now, there's discovery in criminal trials too, but in civil cases, the discovery goes on, and it's very involved, and depositions and interrogatories and all kinds of, you get access to every record. And so the point is, there's not a chance in hell that any of these insurrectionist members of Congress are going to sue anybody. Bill Hagerty, is that his name? Bill Hagerty? Yeah. Bill Hagerty is at least smart enough to know that, which is why he says, he should be in jail, but I'm not going to sue. Tuberville, he's obviously not smart enough to understand what would happen if he tried to sue Jack Smith. But yeah, you'd go through discovery, and then if it got to trial, Jack Smith at trial, which, trials are public, would get to put on all his evidence, which led him to seek the warrant or to subpoena your records and everything and prove why he suspected you guys to be criminal co-defendants of the insurrectionist president. So you're not going to do shit. Now, before one more thing, I'm thinking about it here, before I get to, the idiot in chief. About Jack Smith, and I'll probably talk about this more in depth in another video, but I have great criticism for Merrick Garland. He and Joe Biden are the reason Donald Trump is president today. Donald Trump should be in prison right now. But thanks to Biden and Merrick Garland, now he's president. And, Merrick Garland came in rightfully, if much too late, for a lot of criticism. I started criticizing this guy right off the bat because it was clear to me as a former prosecutor that he wasn't doing a damn thing. He wasn't doing any of the things he should have been doing if he was going against Donald Trump. If he was investigating Trump and his top-level criminal co-conspirators. It was clear all he was doing was going against the insurrectionists who stormed the Capitol and took shits in the hallway and that kind of stuff. But he was not going against Trump and his upper-level co-conspirators. And I explained this right off the bat. Of course, I got attacked incessantly by people who just wanted to defend just reflexively partisan, defending Biden, defending Merrick Garland. I didn't know what I was talking about. You got to build a case from the ground up. No, idiot. You have no idea what you're talking about. Anyway, I'm still pretty bitter about that, if you couldn't tell. But anyway, eventually, when it was obvious to even those people that Merrick Garland wasn't doing anything, and of course they all woke up too late to that fact, I continued to differentiate between Merrick Garland and Jack Smith, because Jack Smith, given the very short period of time in which he had to bring these charges to investigate and bring these charges against Trump, I think he did an amazing job. Except for one decision he made, which turned out to be pivotal. But I didn't know why that decision was made. Now there is a book out by Carol Leonnig about the investigation and the prosecution of Trump. And now we have our answer, and I am beyond pissed to learn that Jack Smith did what he did. And that is the important decision in the stolen documents case about where to file those charges, in what district to indict him. Because he basically had two choices. He could have done it in Washington, and he could have done it in Florida. Because in Washington is where Trump stole the documents from. So there's jurisdiction there, because the crime in part took place there. That's where it began. And then, of course, in Florida, where he concealed the records, obstructed justice, and all of that stuff. So he could have brought the case in either of those districts. He decided to bring the case in Florida, which, as we know, turned out to be a disaster because the case got assigned to Judge Cannon, who turned out to be a complete hack who was just trying to cover for Trump, and even eventually dismissed the case on bogus grounds, which, if Trump wasn't reelected, the appeals court would have reinstated those charges and maybe would have removed Aileen Cannon from the bench. But, because we're surrounded by idiots in this country who voted to reelect Trump, we're never going to know. Anyway, that decision to file in Florida instead of in Washington, that was the one thing I wasn't sure about. why that decision was made. Now, if you're not considering the politics, if you're not considering, well, what judges might we get in each district, it does make more sense to bring the charges in Florida. Let's be honest, much more of the crime was committed in Florida. And so you would have and if you filed in Washington, the defense would file all kinds of motions that this wasn't the proper jurisdiction, and you'd have those legal fights. Much more of the facts that support these charges took place in Florida. So it does make more sense to bring it in Florida for that reason. But given the judge that was ultimately selected, now in retrospect, that was clearly a mistake. But was that really Jack Smith's fault or not? I didn't know. And of course, I didn't know what was going on behind the scenes. Did Merrick Garland have to sign off on where he brought these charges? I didn't know any of that. But now, according to Lenig's book, a lot of people on the special counsel's staff, on Jack Smith's staff, said, you do not file in Florida. We might get this whack job, Aileen Cannon. And that's another thing, too. Aileen Cannon was appointed at the end of Trump's term. I never heard of her before. I didn't know much about her. Now, if I was special counsel, I damn sure would have investigated her to, all the potential judges to find out if she's a partisan hack or someone who would be fair. I mean, a lot of Trump's judges have ruled against Trump. So just because they're a Trump-appointed judge doesn't necessarily mean they would be bad to get on that case. But of course, Jack Smith would have investigated this, I would assume. I mean, I certainly would have. Anyway, members of his staff said, do not bring it in Florida, and argued very strongly that it needs to be brought in Washington. And according to Lenig's book, Jack Smith said, nah, he just dismissed those concerns and said, no, there's nothing to worry. I'm not worried about it. We're going to file it in Florida. Most of the facts took place in Florida. I'm going to file it there. Nothing to worry about. Well, we know what a disaster that decision was. So anyway, maybe we'll get more into all of that stuff later. Finally, I want to bring it back to the idiot in chief. I saw that he was, trying desperately to change the subject yesterday from Epstein. So he had some event in the White House where he's, I don't know, something about adoption or something. And I came across a clip of it this morning, which I'm going to play for you. It's very short. I don't normally like to play this buffoon. It's very short, but it shows you that he has absolutely no idea what he's talking about. His staff writes remarks for him. I don't know if he reads them beforehand, but if he does, it's like completely out of his head by the time he goes up in front of people and reads it again. He's reading something. He clearly has no idea what he's reading and sounds like a complete idiot. So watch this.
Christians and more, think of this, more than twice as likely foster care. They'll adopt the general population. They adopt to it so easily. When they get out, they adopt to it just like becomes second nature. It's amazing. Yet radical left policies in states nationwide make it much harder, not easier, for those families to open up their homes.
I think it's obvious that what he's supposed to be reading here, what he's trying to say, is that Christians, I mean, from what he's rambling here, what sounds to me like is that he was supposed to say that Christians adopt more, like twice as much as the general population, or Christians are twice as likely to adopt children as the general population. But the problem is, he's an idiot and he can't read very well. And so he's also extremely lazy. He doesn't prepare for anything. And as I said, maybe he scanned these remarks beforehand. And if he did, he's long since forgot, even if it was 10 minutes beforehand, he's long since forgot what it was that he reviewed or what he was told about what he was going to read. And so he gets up there and he's reading this. And I think the man is so stupid and he has such a hard time reading that he can't really comprehend what he's reading as he's reading. He's just trying to pronounce the words correctly. He's just trying to read the words. And all his focus is on sounding out the words. and he has nothing left of brain power to try to understand what it is that he's reading. So that's a problem. And he might understand a word here or there, or what often happens, as has happened here, is he hears a word, but he doesn't really know what the word is. And he confuses it with another word. So here, this idiot reads the word adopt, but in his, demented mind, he thinks that means adapt. And what he often does is he reads the prepared remarks and then he goes off script and he inserts his own thoughts, such as they are, into whatever he was reading. So he reads the word adapt and then he feels the need to go off script and ad lib. But he just read the word adopt thinking it's adapt. So then he goes on to say, They adapt to the general population. They adapt to the general population so quick. It's amazing. It's because he has no idea what he's reading. He's just struggling to understand the words. Why are words so hard? What does this mean? What is it? Adopt. What is brain? What does adopt mean? Oh, I know that one. Oh, they adapt to the general population so fast. It's amazing. He's a freaking idiot.